I hit. Okay.
There we go. So, hello.
Hello.
Nice to see you again. To start off with, would you like to say your name and where you are right now?
Yes, my name is Margarete Koenning, and I'm in Australia, in Queensland, in a little village called Mullaney.
Okay. And the first question is, who are you as a human being? And that can be passions, values, qualities about yourself, or whatever you'd like to share.
Mm-hmm. That's a fundamental question I probably engage with in my own inquiry. You know, like as a human being, I'm a person who, in actual fact, probably who am I as a human being? If I really go down in my own inquiry, what I can say is I am love. Otherwise, I am also, you know, a wife of my husband, but these are the factual things which are not, you know, for me. I'm a spiritual being. I'm engaging in humanity, in being in service for people, in being in service for myself and for my family. I am a woman, which loves nature, is passionate about, well, you know, like my passion about humanity and being a human is to reconnect people and to probably, out of my own history, reconnect myself and to build community and to be there to find a place where we can come out of the isolation into connectedness. That defines probably my definition of humanity and my being as a human on this earth is to reconnect with Mother Earth, to reconnect with, nature, culture, music, dance, creativity, life force. And probably one other very big passionate line in there is, as a human being, to be interested in the resilience of humanity and in the resilience of human beings and my own resilience of, survival, of my own resilience of adapting to different cultures, to different musics, to different languages, to different sounds, as an immigrant and as a double immigrant, like to have grown up in different cultures. That's certainly also something which really interests me.
That very first thing you said, that you are deep down love.
Yes.
Would you say more about that?
Yeah. Yeah, because, I can define myself as I am a woman and I'm a wife, I'm an auntie, I'm a grandmother, and I'm this and I'm that. For me, there are all roles I have, or different hats I'm wearing, different petals of my flower, of my being. The core essence for me, in my own inquiry, I can only say that I return to that place where I can say what is my core existence is when I'm connected to that place in my soul, my being of love.
Okay. So I'm wondering a little bit about sort of where you come from. And I would like to ask specifically what comes to mind as an event or a set of circumstances that you would say really shaped you in a significant way.
It's a good question. Very good question. Certainly the circumstances and which shaped me probably the most is that I am born in South America and that I grew up in a little village, 2,000 meters high. And then moving into a totally different culture like Germany, post-war. And I think this experience really shaped me, to have that experience of being held in that incredibly children's loved, secure, very, as children, we were kings and queens, in South America. And if you imagine when we came to Germany, that was certainly out of the window. A child is quiet and not, has to adapt. And I think that fundamental shift really within my own life shaped my life.
Was that Colombia or Chile in South
Was
America?
Colombia. Yeah.
Wow. And so how did that influence you? How did that shift impact you?
It impacted me in the place that I was certainly for a long time confused, where do I belong? And there is probably also my spiritual path in a parallel way, how you can see that, when you ask me, who am I? I never identified really as 100% German. I never identified really to be Colombian, and I'm not identifying really to be Australian either. It's like, like I am who I am. Yeah. And in that way, it really shaped me enormously, that I never had a clear definition of I am, German descent, and that's my ancestry, blah, blah. So in a way, certainly that. And the other thing is that I believe I got a lot of carrying touch in South America. And that certainly shaped me in my being, how I am in the world. Like when I can see where I live now, around me is community, and I love it to go and have a look what the others are doing, and have a chat in the afternoon if they're okay. Look at, how the babies are growing, and to engage, with the neighbors, that was something I really knew from very little childhood. Yeah, to be walking around the village and have a look. Already when I was 3, I can remember, that's one of my first memories. I knew what others were eating, or, how they were living, or, I still do that. Yeah,
that's beautiful.
And I missed that a little bit. When we were living in a countryside here in Australia, quite isolated, I could see that was not suiting my existence. I lose somehow my belonging when that is not possible, when I can't see, how others are and how others are living, and how, and share.
Yeah. So I'm also wondering, you mentioned, being a woman, but I'm curious how you experience and understand yourself within your gender or as a woman.
As a woman, yeah, that's a good point. I didn't become a mother. That was certainly probably impactful for me too in my life. And therefore I had a lot of capacity, I realized, to engage and adopt people into my life. I had a lot of, spare availability, so to speak, to give to other children, to give to other young adults, which I still do. I'm quite surrounded. So as a woman, I define myself as, I would definitely think that I have a very motherly way of being in the world too, to care for people, to care for little children, but teenagers, naughty kids.
The fun ones.
I love them, actually. Yeah, when they have their own way of being. It is something which I enjoy. And as a woman, how do I define myself? I really support women to, step into their potential. I'm quite influenced. Probably that is, when I moved out with 17 from home, my mother moved with me. And she got really engaged also in human rights, and in particular at that time in women's rights. Alice Schwarzer was in Europe, in Germany. And we often went, to demonstrate on the streets for human, and women's rights. Yes. And I think there was quite an influence that I could watch my mother grow from being a housewife, bringing up, 4 children. She always had her profession. She was a, professional woman. But she supported us because she had 3 girls and a son. She supported us very much to be independent, to have our own, independence with having our own education. That was the reason why they left Colombia, get our education so we can look after ourselves and never be really totally dependent on men. So in a way, it went the other way, the other pendulum, from her experience of dependency to independence. So, and I think that influenced me in a way that I always was independent. And that is still a very important part in my life as a woman.
And what about the time factor? How are you experiencing your age right now?
That's a good,
or aging in general?
Aging. On one hand, I really enjoy aging, because what it brings into my life, even more so, is that I can be direct, and I can be very direct and can say what I want to say. Yeah. So I feel there is a gain of freedom I experience in aging. I don't have the need so much anymore to please. So, and there is also a certain amount of respect. For instance, when I run groups, I can see that when the young ones are running groups, they probably are struggling far more to find that place of respect. Where when I step in there, it's like there is already through my age, there is a presence where the respect is held. That I really enjoy. There are struggles with aging, like physical limitations you have, or health issues which I had to face in my life, and so I also find aging a challenge in its way, how I can embrace the consistent shift of my also limitations and be content within that place. My world gets smaller, which I find interesting. I just contemplated about that the other day. I don't necessarily enjoy traveling that much anymore. I traveled a lot when I was young. And, and in actual fact, in that smallness, I see a total beauty, because my belonging is more clear. So there is also this contradiction. Yeah. So the nomad actually settles.
I was going to say, you found a place.
Yes. I certainly found my place in the world. Yeah. As a woman, as an aged woman, yeah, I certainly did. I live in this village, and I feel really I totally belong here.
So in that place that you found and in your life, how would you say that you experience and understand power and privilege? How are those for you?
Certainly privilege every day. In my deep, gratitude, that I can see my privilege as a white person, as in this country, which is it's probably judgmental to say that, but there is certainly a lot of unfinished business, how I would call it, exactly within that. And
I don't think it's judgmental. I think it's colonialism.
Yeah. And I think, like that is something which I struggle sometimes with here in Australia, like how strong that is in actually, how underneath the carpet and still very denied the privilege and power we have as white human beings. Not only in that regards to indigenous culture, but it is also the privilege of how we abuse our resources, abuse our earth, abuse our there is a nice word in German, I don't know the English word, vermeintlich, like the thinkable power we have. I don't know how you would translate that. We think we have the power of the planet. I don't believe we do. Yeah, it will. So, sometimes these things, I have to say, I feel incredibly, certainly me, very personally lived through a time which was fairly uncomplicated, if so to speak, very, I had the privilege, an incredible privilege, even education wasn't easy for me. I'm a dyslexic person, and that wasn't always easy. I can't say that, but like I had a huge privilege to have an education and to do, when I finished my education, I could do what I want. I can apply for every job I got, where I wanted to go. While I can see that gets more and more difficult, for young people. I feel sometimes a sadness where we're heading as humans. As well as hope when I hear sometimes young people talk and how they, they're incredible, passionate and intelligence, and how they, are creative and invention of new ways of being together. So it's really both sides.
It sounds a bit like that aging process you were talking about, where capitalism went up and it was really easy and really worked, and maybe it's getting a little more complicated as it ages.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm also curious about other people who have crossed your path, and I wonder who stands out as having been a significant influence on you, another person.
Certainly my first person who has been a significant influence was Maruja, my nanny in South America, who certainly carried me and a lot, looked after me. She was very young. She's probably still alive, I don't know. I certainly think she had a huge influence on me. In her love she shared with me, in her being proud. She was very, very, I can remember one thing, which is impacted me enormously. I think I was turning 30 to my 30th birthday. And through certain channels, which, were people my parents knew still living in Colombia at that time, who lived with us in that village, she sent a message to me for my 30th birthday.
Wow.
And just that she remembered after such a long time, that was certainly something which I couldn't have imagined, and I really could feel that influence. My parents influenced me enormously, my father and my mother, both of them. I think they were both very, certainly not always easy. And there were lots of things which you could question. But there was one thing I totally knew, always knew, I'm loved. I never questioned that. And I think that experience certainly influenced me for my life.
Yeah, knowing that you're loved. Wow.
Yeah, I knew that. My mother had a huge impact on me in my education, being dyslexic and being different. And we were a very academic family. All the others probably have doctors and whatever. And she always said one sentence, which I nearly hear every day still. You are not dumb. You're very clever, and just open your mouth. Just share with what you have to say. And she, she really took me out of school. She really fought like a lioness. At that time, she was present. Even in earlier years, she was probably not present at all. But when it came to that crunch, that was really, she was there for me. Then through her, I met, that's probably the next person which quite influenced me. Well, I met because she started Gestalt therapy when she was my age now, or probably a bit earlier even.
Your
in
mother?
50s. Yeah, my mother. With Marianne Frey at that time in Germany, when Marianne came back to Germany and run groups. So, like that was one channel how I met Gestalt therapy. And Marianne was one of my first teachers in the training, as well as Michael Smith. He had a huge influence on me. He died very early, Michael. So really my Gestalt journey then became very influential, because that was another place where in education, like it was often that I was dismissed, disregarded, thrown out of school. I got thrown out of school when I was 16. And when I then did through the, second education, and I met this Gestalt community which was slowly building in Germany. Then I started to study social work, and in that social work community, there was, several people who also were engaged in Gestalt. That changed my life enormously. It really impacted me totally, because I was, like not very well in my early 20s, physically not very well. I was quite sick. And someone told, one really beautiful female doctor, and she told me, you have to go and do some therapy, young woman. I can't help you anymore. And that's how I started my Gestalt journey with Michael. I was probably, yeah.
So what did you find in Gestalt? How did it affect you?
Belonging. It was like a community. And again, with Michael, it was, my experience that he challenged me, but I always felt loved. I always knew, that he came out of that place, where where he respected and loved me. So with that confrontation, I think I learned a lot. What did you ask? What was the question?
Yeah, I asked what you found in it and how it affected you.
Yes, what I found in it. In a nutshell, probably what I found is to step out of being a victim, out of certain experiences I had, because there were some difficult experiences we had. You know, when we came back from Colombia, we were for half a year in a children's home and things like this, you know, like which happened in our childhood, which was not easy at all. And, you know, like out of that, I probably had more the mentality of, in my early years, of being very insecure and feeling like a victim. And what I found in Gestalt is the empowerment of, you know, through really meeting me, to give me, to be met in my power and to be re-engaged to my own belief, to come home actually to my own belief, to who I am really in my core.
So
then
is that sort of like resilience that you were talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, to be seen, you know, in my resilience, in my survival, rather than in my, you know, victimhood. Poor bugger. Yeah. I have sometimes funny little memories, you know, like with Michael. I remember when he once took, you know, like within a group setting, and that I have to come back to that. But you know, like he took my leg and gave me a kiss on my, you know, on my how is it called, chin of my leg, you know, and looked at me and said, "Margarete needs her drama." And that really, you know, that was something which really, this little moment changed my existence in the world. And I thought, yeah, okay, I need my drama, that's true. But I had more distance within myself to that, and I could watch it. And I had, you know, I gained the awareness in being able, and in that awareness, I could actually make choices. Do I really need that or not? Mm-hmm. So that is a very profound moment, you know, for me. And, you know, when you ask me also what I gained from that, you know, we were a group. We were the second training group from Jerry and Willie Krauss Kogan. And we were a closed group of 14 people. And this cohorts, I still connected, you know, I'm still connected with several of them. Not all of them, but quite some people I have still connection with, you know, which is a long time ago. It wasn't, I think we started 82. And to be, you know, part of that cohort was like, they were my family, and I could regain, you know, like they gave me feedback, and they could see me in my totality, with my snots, with my fun, with my resilience, but also with my vulnerability, and with my, you know, like insecureness, and with my searching. Yeah. And to travel with these people for 5 years was a huge privilege, which, you know, I still carry.
So I would ask, coming from that experience about that training cohort, would you say that you feel like you're part of a Gestalt community? Does that phrase mean anything to you?
Yeah, certainly I am. I'm also part of, you know, which shifted probably 20 years ago, 20 or 3 years ago, that I'm also part of the family constellation community, because, you know, like I also incorporated later on the approach of family constellation or systemic work. you know, so there is an overlap, but there is also a differentiation, you know, where Gestalt community sometimes embraces that and sometimes it doesn't, which is fine. You know, like it's, but I see myself actually to have really my one foot in there and the other foot probably in there, that I really, my Gestalt background is certainly my total fundament. That's like my carpet I walk on. That, you know, like it's, that's the skeleton I work with consistently. That's a skeleton, and it's not even work with. I wouldn't even call it. That's my stance and my posture in the world. Yeah, to be relational, to be in dialogue, to make my commitment to dialogue is very important for me.
So what is the Gestalt community for you then? What does that mean?
It's not so much that you know, like for a long time I was part here in Australia for that, you know, when I came here, we were quite, how do you say, when pioneers, you know, it just started. There was Yaro, he came from a very different background than, and his wife Maria, which, you know, Maria and me, we did our training parallel and we moved both parallel to Australia, Maria Vogt. And she was with Yaro Starak. And so, you know, like Yaro had the institute in Brisbane, and then we started the guns movement within, you know, Melbourne and stuff like this. And I felt really quite involved. I never made myself dependent on any one institute, which these days. So I'm, you know, so I belong, and I don't have a total identity because I never did my own institute, so to speak. Yeah. So I worked for lots of institutes as a trainer, which started in Germany, actually, with Willy and Jerry. And there is where Milan Srekovic comes in, you know, because I was his assistant when Milan worked, and I really appreciated that. And that's why with him, I got really engaged in the relational Gestalt concept at that time. Milan worked very relational, very much, if you could say it, Laura style. Yeah. And I really appreciate, I think that suited my way of being very much. So these days I'm here in Australia. I watch Gestalt for a little bit more from a distance. I'm, you know, like I'm not that engaged anymore in any of the organizational stuff or something like this. I'm available for supervision. I'm very available for supporting students. I supported lots and lots and lots and lots of students, probably hundreds of students. Now to go through, also through this hideous process of doing a master degree. Yeah, so that they don't lose their belief in, you know, what the essence is of Gestalt therapy. So I feel myself like somehow probably like a fringe dweller within that community. And I know that I'm deeply respected, you know, like, and my place is exactly what I want. So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that hideous process of going through the academic hoops. I think it's interesting the perspective of having stepped outside of, you know, formal education. Like you said, you were kicked out of school. And I think it's interesting when people find different ways of learning that are not just that straight line.
Yes. You know, like that is for me, you know, where I am incredibly thankful for particular Jerry also, you know. Jerry always, in a way, he challenged me, but he also always believed in me. you know, like even with my dyslexic being, you know, like I think he always saw my potential and fostered that, you know, and so in a funny way, because I was dyslexic, I was the first one who finished her training, you know, who put in her thesis, which we had to write at that time, which was, you know, not at all in that way how you would probably need to write it these days in an academic way. We had a lot of freedom. Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned that you also, you know, it sounds like your other foot is kind of in constellations. But I'm wondering what you would say that sort of the essence of your work is.
The essence is really very simple. I can say the essence of my work is very much that I, from disconnection to connection, from isolation actually into connection, as well as that I would like, you know, like it's the essence that I meet people with an open heart. You know, like that I meet them and look, you know, what is it which is specific and I like about this person. And when I say like, it's not in the category of like or dislike. It's more in a category that where is my connection from a heart to this human being. I also, that I never see the human being in an isolated way. I also believe if I meet you today in this interview, that you have your ancestry, Heather, that you have your people behind you. Yeah, and that what is in between the two of us is very unique. But I also trust that your field and you are held in a much bigger field. And that component, I think, was missing for me often within the Gestalt community. In fact, that what Gestalt provides in a theoretical way is, you know, the connection with the field that I feel sometimes that got lost. And through constellation, that got brought back in. And there is another person who really was influential for me because, you know, with him, I did the first time that I did a workshop with family constellation, and that was, and I worked for his institute in Heidelberg, was Victor Chu. And Victor, he did family constellation from a very Gestalt perspective at that time. That was, I think, 1999 or something when I went there, 98, 99. And so, you know, like I went from that line into that field of constellation. And then I met really profound people there. I reconnected with Hunter Beaumont in that community. He was my teacher as a Gestalt trainer. When, you know, like with Jerry and Willie. And, you know, like I also met years later, people who I knew out of the Gestalt community than in the constellation community.
See here, it's you and all of your ancestors behind you, right?
That's right.
Okay, interesting. So I'm also wondering what challenges you would say that you have run up against. And I mean, it's kind of an open question. It can be challenges in Gestalt, or it can be challenges as a person, or what you would say you've been.
Challenges, yeah. I mean, you know, like as a person, I can clearly say it's a challenge to leave your country, to leave your language. I wasn't very fluent when I came here in English. I wouldn't say that. You know, English was the language I got thrown out of school with. So my English teacher would look now.
So we're doing this in your third or fourth language?
Third language. My first language was Spanish, which I lost then because I was probably, and I got it back a little bit, but you know, then yeah, I don't foster Spanish that much at all. So Yeah, so to leave this, it was very different culture to arrive here in Australia and to live here. There was certainly the challenge that it took me several years to really settle down in a way that, I often had my backpack packed in my mind. My suitcase was always standing at the door in my mind. I go home, I go home, but where is home? And then I often had that question, where is home? What does that really mean? That I certainly found a challenge. It was a challenge for me when my parents got really old, that I went back and nursed my father until he died, but not to be. I had a lot of conversation through letters with them, which I'm very thankful of. Beautiful letters. And but when my mother got demented, I went every year to look after her every summer for 2 months or 6 weeks, 2 months, which was my yearly, in a way, meditation place, to be with her and to sit with her. And I had very profound experiences, but there was always an incredible heart wrench to leave her. I think that was one of my biggest challenges. Some of my health issues were quite challenging in my life. Also life-changing, probably, yeah. Other than that, what is, like challenges in Gestalt? There were certainly loops and hoops to be confronted with politics. I always find that challenging and not necessarily very encouraging either. Sometimes where I feel, I had times where I got really quite disillusioned. And I think, like, wow, how can that happen if we have a commitment to dialogue, like yeah. So there is, like, I find it interesting to watch the challenge also from a little bit from an outside. I think that was why I always kept outside a little. I could watch the split in between. There was in every town was a split. In every city was a split. If it was Melbourne, if it was, like Brisbane, if it was, then Brisbane merged, but, then Maria passed away. So in a way that fall away, like it's, to observe that split quite interests me still astounds me sometimes. I have an assumption, and it is only an assumption. I never claim to have the truth in there, but I often thought that as soon as money gets involved, it becomes difficult. Because it's a private enterprise. And when it becomes a private enterprise and a private business, what is the interest and what's the ethics and what's the holding of that business and lies. And there I have seen quite dysfunctional, strange movements.
Yep. And the ownership and the ego and all of those aspects of humanity come out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that certainly was also in the Gestalt community, Yeah.
Yep. So what about the other parts, not the challenges or the frustrations or the nearly giving up, but what are some of the satisfactions that come up for you? What are some of those stories that stay with you?
Lots of stories stay with me, like I can tell you some of the stories, like where, I mean, like I felt I had a huge privilege, my first job as a therapist was in a hospital system in Germany. In hospital, it's called St. Camillus Clinic in Duisburg. which is lower class, how do you say, lower income, was in the coal area, within the industrial area, in the center of Germany. And we were 5 group therapists. From us 5, we were 4 Gestalt therapists. So we had quite a strong voice within that psychotherapeutic field. And at that time, we had a huge amount of freedom as well as support with each other mainly. To work, you know, and I had my own ward of 14 beds, and you know, like we run our training, or we run the group over half a year with these closed groups. So we did group every day Gestalt, and within this, I experienced enormous amount of satisfaction. You know, if I look back, I can tell you one story. There was, you know, one client. His name, and I can say his name, Mr. Bach, we called him. He passed away by now. But, you know, like he was, I got a folder like that thick, you know, really, you know, 3-4 centimeters thick. And they told me it's a total useless case. You can let him just sit in your group for half a year, but, you know, don't think it's the 7th time that he is in a hospital system to do something with his addiction. Me never reading, I never read his folder. So I went into the group day by day, and I could feel his arrogance. He had an incredible, you know, and I was really astounded about his arrogance, how that occurred, or it supposedly seemed to be arrogant. Yeah, his posture, just in his physical being and how he related to the others. And one day I just, you know, like in a Gestalt sense and doing experiments, I thought, I wonder how it would be if he would sit on a table rather than on the floor with us, you know, on the ground in a chair. So I put his chair on a table into the circle. And he came in and I said, this is your place for today. And he looked and he went up on the table and placed himself. And he was very comfortable. All the others came and they looked and they couldn't believe, you know, and none of us, we could. And he was totally, utterly comfortable in his chair up there. You know, and I just asked him, I was much younger than him. I was just in my early 30s. And I asked him, you know, like what his experience is up there. And he said, yeah, this is very comfortable. And actually it let my jaw drop, because my assumption was that he would feel really uncomfortable. Yeah. So I said, okay, I think it's enough. And you know, like, you're very welcome to come down again. So he put his chair down and I said, what's the difference? He said, yeah, I really liked it up there. And I said, it really astounds me. So I want to investigate. I would love to know where this experience comes from. And he looked at me and you could see that it made click, click, click in his brain. And tears came on his eyes, and he said, no one ever asked me. But I was a child, and I was the son of a bargeman, a big barge on the Rhine, on the River Rhine. And since a little baby, I always was on the helm of the big barge. So I was always sitting on the helm. And that's a really comfortable place for me. He said when he was 7 and he got, you know, that was the most impactful experience, and he had never shared that. The barge stopped and let him off to the land to go to school, and his parents went on the barge underneath the bridge and left him. And at that point, he says he made a pact. He will never, ever in his life, ever let anybody come close. He shared that story. He never drank again. He kept, even when I immigrated to Australia, every year in contact with me and sent me a letter. Hi, Chief. So he called me. I just want to report how we all going. And he really thanked me for, like he said, that was the first time that he felt seen. And that is for me where Gestalt comes in, like in just being with the phenomenology and watching the phenomenology rather than the history or that what is,
And rather than trying to make him horizontal, it's recognizing that he was up there.
That's right. Yeah, and from that on, he was the chief. He was the chief in the group, and people understood and could take him as a chief. There was no resistance anymore to him.
And that happens with neurodivergent people, and that happens with leaders, and that happens. It's the tall poppies, right?
Yeah, very true. Yeah. And, lots of these stories happen in this first 3 years of which I must say, they were my apprenticeship. Without that, I wouldn't work the way how I work.
Yeah, I'm just sitting with what you just said. I'm sorry. It's just. So from this point where you are, I mean, that's a fairly long stretch from that apprenticeship to where you are now. But where are you going? What's next? What's next for you, and what do you think is next for Gestalt?
What's next? Like I'm turning 67, and lots of my colleagues, lots of my friends in Germany who are doing my training, they're all retired. And I watch that with a big interest because I can't imagine to retire. And that's probably where Laura comes in for me. Not only Laura, but also, Marianne Frey, and if it is Jerry, all this, my old teachers, which now my total mentor and good friend, who I spent at times before COVID a lot of time with Gunni Baxter, Dr. Gunni Baxter from Austria. And, and they're all in their 80s or have been working until, and I see myself in that that way. I probably work in a different way. I do supervision and things, but I do also like whatever comes through my door. Being in a village, if someone comes and they want help, then they get help. Yeah. I probably, where I'm going is to find a little bit more balance, to look after myself, to take time off, which I am doing right now, whole month, which is beautiful. And but I want to pass on knowledge. That is probably one more thing. I really is my wish is that I get the opportunity to pass on my knowledge, to pass it on to young ones. They can use it. And I do that. I have a team of 5 German women who work with me. And we go from 67 to 24, 25, I think. And, like that's where I pass on knowledge. And I love to teach. Teaching is a passion of mine. So, but I, also feel that I would love to teach, or I do teach here on my mountain, that people come to see me, that I'm not traveling that much anymore. A bit tired of traveling.
Are you literally on a mountain, or?
Yes, I'm literally on. Marlene is on the mountain. Well, you know how Australia has mountains. They are not, you know, they are not mountains like in Europe.
They're not the Alps, they're big hills. But
Yeah.
sorry, just stupid questions that I have to ask.
No, it's a very particular area, actually. It's a very specific, and that has a meaning for me, you know, like it's called the you know, Sunshine Coast hinterland, but here are the Glasshouse Mountains. They're called Glasshouse Mountains, and they have a history in the First People Nation of there are cause of you know, the cause of a big volcano, but they are also have the history of a family system. And we have a big mother mountain and the father mountain and the children, and there is a whole, you know, mystery about them. And so that always lives with me day by day. I never get sick of them.
So what do you think is next for Gestalt?
To get back to the roots, and which I can already observe, which means, you know, I read something quite interesting the other day, was where sometimes I believe, you know, there is something where it says, oh, that is such a new approach to relational. I don't believe that. I believe that is actually how it started. Be held in that field from Laura. Yeah. And I think, you know, like where Gestalt will go is back to the essence of that reality of supporting people in their resilience and their potential, and become relational. I can see more and more also the movement, you know, I can see that in Sydney. They closed the higher education part, which brought them back to a lot of freedom to work far more phenomenological and experiential, and really be there as group process. So I don't know. I have no idea. It will do what it will do, you know, in its own evolution. It always has, probably. And, yeah, would be weird to say I know.
No, that's fair. I'm always curious what people imagine. So.
Yeah, my imagination is that I can see, you know, like there is some shift and there is some movement. And yeah, I'm very curious to see that happening.
That's a very Gestalt thing, that curiosity.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, would you say that there's anything that we've left out that you think would be important to add about yourself, or any final thoughts?
Probably, you know, like what my wish would be for myself as well as for the Gestalt community is that, and I haven't finished formulating that in my being, but, you know, I try the best to just bring that, is, you know, like if I look back, Gestalt was also born out of the field of a very social and political move. I really believe we are on an extreme crossroad right now in humanity and on the earth. You know, you can see that with the pandemic. I can see that with climate change, you know, like things which are really crucial. And they are crucial. And how we can also cooperate, you know, incorporate that within to bring that into the awareness and into our day-to-day being, stance, work, and in our own posture towards a relational concept, you know, like with the world. you know, how we can, so that would be my question, you know, how we can incorporate that even more, to go away from this, you know, like one thing I really think is extremely important is to encourage people to do group work rather than individual work.
I very strongly agree with that.
You know, because, you know, I can really see in our individualistic stance, our world is so individualistic that we get stuck, you know, stuck, and there's another loop coming, and another loop, and there's another problem we can look at, and another problem we can look at. That is where, you know, like actual effect is beautiful. That links back to your right at the beginning question of privilege, where I think we abuse our privilege. Yeah. And for me, it's more, how can we learn really to be, you know, inclusive, sit in our differentiation, in our differences, and include all, you know, and become more, you know, open from our heart space. Yeah. And that only works in group. Yeah. When I sit through all the differentiations and sit with.
Yeah, just when you said abusing privilege, I'm just imagining a new payment arrangement in my private practice, where if a client is going to come and make me listen to their same drama again,
yes,
that I'll just take their money and open the space for somebody else. Just instead of indulging the same thing again and again. Yeah.
Yes, and you know, that links for me to my privilege as being an elder person. I often say that. I say to them, I don't want to waste your money. Yeah. And do you give me permission to be really direct? They always do.
Yes, I think that is an elder privilege. I mean, I don't have time for this anymore.
That's right.
That's interesting. And I'm remembering what you said about your first Michael, who said, you know, here's your drama. You need your drama.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, is it okay for you if we leave this conversation here? I have really enjoyed sitting with you today. This has been lovely.
Thank you, Heather, for your very kind and precise questioning. I really enjoyed that too. It is, you know, it's a gift for me to actually have the opportunity to reflect, because, you know, it's very rare that you do that in such a
these conversations for me are lovely. So
yes.
thank you too.
So thank